This year's Monterey Car Week gave us more incredible car reveals than ever before, and the majority of these exciting reveals were Porsches. We saw the Kalmar 9X9, which is basically a 993 based 959 resto mod. We saw the Porsche Sonderwunsch produced 993 Speedster that used components from the last GT3 based Speedster. We saw the Roof Rodeo, which is the off-road version of their amazing CTR. We saw the Porsche 911 Turbo 50 Years Edition, which in all reality is just a well-optioned 911 Turbo S with an enormous price increase. We saw the Gunther Werks GWR, which is a lighter and more aerodynamic version of their 993 resto mod. But of all the reveals at Monterey Car Week, the most talked about and most exciting was the Tuttle Porsche GT1. Which makes sense, because this thing is the ultimate wet dream for the ultimate Porsche enthusiast. It's naturally aspirated, it has a manual transmission, and an air-cooled flat six engine. Now everyone is going crazy about the exterior of this car, but no one's talking about that incredible Bugatti level interior, which might be the nicest that a Porsche has ever received. But we're going to talk about the interior, the exterior, the engine, the chassis, the suspension, the performance, the price, and even a few of the details that Tuttle Porsche has been keeping a secret. But before we get into all of that, if you're new to my channel, I publish original Porsche-focused content every Sunday. So if you're not subscribed yet, click below to subscribe. And be sure to click the notifications bell so you can be notified about my newest videos. As strange as it sounds, the Porsche GT1 is actually the successor to the Porsche 962. And I know that can be hard to wrap your head around, since the 962 is a purebred prototype that has its roots all the way back in the 904. And the GT1 is based on a road car, but after the McLaren F1 GTR took 4 of the top 5 spots of Le Mans in 1995, Porsche knew they didn't have a race car that could compete, and this led to the creation of the Porsche GT1. The Porsche GT1 Strassen version, or road car, came in 3 different flavors, with the first generation being based on a 993 and the rest being based on the 996. The version that Tuttle created is clearly inspired by the second version, as it features an exterior that is very similar from almost every angle. The exterior was designed by Florian Flateau, who also designed cars for Singer, and this becomes immediately evident when you look at the Singer all-terrain competition study. And may I be the first to say thank you to Florian for not giving this car 996 headlights, as they were a complete eyesore on one of the most exciting road cars ever made. The body on the new GT1 is all carbon fiber, and like the Strassen version, features a clamshell bonnet and engine lid, and that iconic roof scoop. The aerodynamics are also nearly identical to the second generation Strassen version, with the 3 openings in the bonnet, the huge outlets behind the front wheels, the turbo intakes in the rear fenders, the vents in the rear quarter windows, and the incorporated rear diffuser. And let's not forget about those fantastic looking fender mounted rear view mirrors. But the appearance of the GT1 deviates from the Strassen version with the lack of a huge rear wing and the addition of wheel fans and a generously sized front splitter. The rear tubular space frame, engine layout, intake, and suspension setup is also very similar to the original Strassen version, but while the GT1 looks quite similar to the Strassen version on the outside, the interior is another story. This video about the Tuttle Porsche GT1 is brought to you by Porsche Art Prints by Arc Driver Automotive Photography. These unique Porsche art prints are a great way to improve the aesthetics in any room in your house, and a great way to help support this channel. They feature museum quality printing on heavy duty paper that has a partly glossy and partly matte finish. You can check out the entire collection by clicking on the link in the description below. The cabin has a sort of retro-futuristic feel, which has the elements of a race car, but those elements are wrapped in suede, leather piping, and brushed aluminum. A full roll cage is well concealed within the moldings. The center console features a flying buttress design that suspends speakers below and houses a gear shifter and toggle switches above. We're just going to take a second to appreciate this and think about how fun it would be to drive this car and flip all those switches. A wraparound gauge cluster is still present, but appears to be mostly digital, but this layout is far more exciting than the digital gauges on the current 911. I would have to imagine that sitting in the driver's seat and watching the numbers on the screen increase as you launch this car is no doubt a thrilling experience. The steering wheel is not quite what I would have expected, but it's got a nice simple design and continues the retro futuristic feel of the cabin. The seats have huge bolsters and a raised leg position, and are finished in extremely supple looking leather and perforated suede with brushed aluminum details. Behind the seats is a vertical wall with something at headrest level that might be a window into the engine bay. The engine powering the GT1 came as a bit of a surprise to everyone, but for different reasons. The mid-mounted motor is a derivative of the unit found in the ultra-lightweight Tuttle Porsche 911K, which means that this engine is not only naturally aspirated, it's also air-cooled, and a mighty advanced air-cooled engine at that. Now the 911K is named as such because the motor can rev to 11,000 RPM, so 911K. But since the GT1 was built to be a touring car and not a track car, Tuttle has prevented the engine from revving that high. Both naturally aspirated and twin turbocharged engines can be had, and both use 4-liter units with 4 valves per cylinder. The naturally aspirated version produces nearly 500 horsepower, and the turbocharged version produces nearly 600 horsepower. Most people were expecting this car to be hybrid and also have huge horsepower numbers to challenge the latest crop of hypercars, but the GT1 was intended to be more of a GT car than a track car. And given the large percentage of hybrid and turbocharged vehicles that account for the majority of the sports cars made today, hopefully most everyone can appreciate just how exciting it is that a new car of this magnitude is powered by a naturally aspirated, air-cooled engine. The GT1 is offered with a manual or 7-speed dual-clutch transmission. The 911K uses a highly modified magnesium version of the 915 gearbox, but since the motor in the GT1 produces quite a bit more horsepower, it might be utilizing a different gearbox. The car features a completely bespoke, racing-inspired, twin wishbone front and rear suspension, which is mounted to the tubular space frame. And Tuttle also had a bespoke brake kit made for this car. The new GT1 weighs just 2,645 pounds, and to give you an idea of how light that is, the 997 Carrera S weighs 3,131 pounds, which is 456 pounds more than the GT1, and the latest 911 Carrera weighs an astonishing 4,321 pounds, which is 1,676 pounds more. So with its light weight, that 500 or 600 horsepower in the GT1 goes quite a long way. As performance goes, the new GT1's bark is probably a little louder than its bite, as this thing looks like it's ready to tear racetracks in half. But it's really more of a high-speed luxury car. Tuttle has not released any performance specs, but I think we can get some rough estimates by theoretically benchmarking this car against another Porsche that has a similar power to weight ratio, which is the 997 GT2 RS. The GT2 RS weighs 3,075 pounds and produces 620 horsepower. So fairly similar to the GT1, but it weighs 430 pounds more and has an additional 20 horsepower. Top speed for the GT2 is 205 miles per hour, and the 0 to 60 time is 3.4 seconds, while the twin turbocharged GT1 has roughly 20 horsepower less. It's quite a bit lighter and significantly more aerodynamic. So I think we can assume a similar but slightly better 0 to 60 time of 3.2 seconds and a higher top speed that is closer to 210 miles per hour. So now the biggest question that nobody seems to be asking, and Tuttle isn't telling us, is the GT1 a completely new car, or is it a modified Porsche? The open clamshell and interior pics provide a lot of information about the car, so let's take a closer look at those and see what we can find out. Like the Strassen version, the GT1 uses a center chassis frame with an integrated roll cage and separate tubular space frames for the front and rear. Even a closer look at this picture doesn't offer many details about the donor car. So let's look at the interior photos and see what kind of information they can offer. The picture of the back of the interior once again doesn't provide any clues. But when we look at this image that shows the entire dash with the door open, we can begin to get some information. While every interior component is completely bespoke, we can see that the upper and lower dash trim fit around the donor Porsche's frame. And when we compare this to the mostly stripped out interior of a 993 GT, we can see that a few of the components line up. The molding around the upper dash and gauges looks nearly identical, as does the molding around the lower dash, and the transmission tunnel also looks to be in the same place. So from looking at these images, it appears that the chassis for the GT1 is the same as the Strassen version, a 993 frame in the center with custom tubular space frames in the front and rear. Tuttle Porsche says this car will cost roughly 1.5 million pounds, which is roughly $2 million, and only 22 will be produced. This is most likely because 22 is roughly the number of Strassen versions believed to be made. Richard Tuttle says he wants people to actually drive this car. But if you price a car at $2 million and only build 22 of them, then all of the top car investors will be competing with each other to get one. And none of these vehicles will ever make it into the hands of a person who will see this car as anything other than an investment. If you want people to drive your cars, then you need to produce them in volume. The Tuttle Porsche GT1 is truly an incredible machine, and I doubt I'll ever have the pleasure of even seeing one in real life. But in a time when even Porsche has abandoned lightweight sports cars and manual transmissions, it's great to see a company like Tuttle continuing the idea of what a Porsche can be and giving us automotive purists something to get excited about. Thanks for watching, and for more Porsche content that you cannot find anywhere else, click here to subscribe.